Enter the world of the supernatural with Paranormal M, where the strange and inexplicable reign supreme. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay tuned for our latest mind-bending adventures. Let the journey begin. Saw a clown in the middle of the night while sleeping over at my grandparents' house. When I was about 4, I was sleeping at my grandparents' house. I got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I saw a clown. It had stereotypical red hair and a white face. It was the Boston area. I got so scared and our eyes met, and the clown put his finger to his lip as if to say shh, backed out of the doorway. At this point, I ran as fast as I could to my grandparents' room. My grandparents would never let me sleep with them. But this time, my grandmother saw how scared I was, and I told her what happened. And like I said, she could see something was really having me extremely scared. I never knew if it was a dream or what. For many years, it irked me. And when the internet was widely available, I started looking up clowns in Boston in the 80s, trying to figure it out. Then I saw this article and almost shit myself. The Clown Scare of 1981 that terrified Boston. And it was with the COVID-19 pandemic that I haven't really been, taking any long road trips to visit strange places. I've been exploring closer to home. And luckily, there are some weird places very close by. That's one of the nice things about New England. There are spooky stories all over the place. Recently, I took a trip to the Lawrence School in Brookline, Massachusetts. It was built in the early 20th century. The Lawrence School is part of Brookline's public school system. It's a very stately-looking building, but in May of 1981, some students at the school reported seeing very unusual, creepy clowns. On Tuesday, May 5th, 1981, the Brookline police received a report that 2 men dressed as clowns had approached children on Longwood Avenue near the Lawrence School. The men were driving a van and tried to entice the children into the van by offering them candy, according to the Boston Globe. The vehicle was described as an older black van with ladders on the side, a broken front headlight, no hubcaps. Brookline police called the town school department, told administrators to be extra cautious. School Superintendent Robert I. Sperber instructed all 10 elementary schools to warn pupils. The Boston Globe, May 7th, 1981, page 21. Beware clown, pupils told. This is not an isolated incident, but was instead just one of several creepy clown sightings across the greater Boston Spring area. Officials in Boston's school system were told the last week of April to warn elementary and middle school pupils about sinister clowns. The memo was sent on May 6th. It has been brought to the attention of the police department and the district office that adults dressed as clowns have been bothering children to and from school, the memo said. Please advise all students, it continued, that they must stay away from strangers, especially ones dressed as clowns. The Boston Globe, May 7th, 1981, page 21, Beware clown pupils. I was born in 1978. Couldn't have been more than 4 years old. It still spooks me to this day. What the fuck did I see? The cow. So, having wanted to go ghost hunting for some time, I grab a few friends, go out to a location that they said had some strange things happened there, and at least was said to be haunted. It was an old pioneer village, kind of cool to see. And while the only strange thing that really happened was that we all heard a whistle right before we started recording and testing for EMF, while we didn't find anything, the supposed house that had the most activity had burned down. In front of it, there was a bunch of cows. Nothing too crazy, I thought to myself. We were out in foresty areas. After dropping everyone at their homes, I follow suit. On the drive home, I pass a cow close to my road, being past midnight, pitch black. All I saw was that white part of their face reflect back at me, as well as its eyes. It scared me until I realized that it was a cow. Fast forward a few weeks, one of the 6 I went to the location joins me on another trip, this time to a different area. While a few mildly interesting things happened there, it wasn't crazy enough to be totally conclusive. However, there were more cows. I found it funny and a bit crazy that they were here too. I go home with no troubles. A few years later, I'm on the phone as I'm driving home from a late-night drive. Time was probably 11 p.m. It was dark outside. We had spent about an hour talking about the paranormal. On the turn right before my house, I see what looks like a slender white figure emerging from the bushes. I scream loudly, not knowing what the fuck it was. That it was until I recognized the shape of the reflecting light back at me. Another cow. Now I live right near an open-range farm, but this was right next to my house. I'd never seen them get this close. I've yet to see another that close too. I love cows. Strange sounds and noises. So for context, I live in some very normal suburbs. There's a school nearby and all that. So nothing would usually seem out of the ordinary. My town is unassuming. However, I've heard strange things within my own home. I live with family still, and once a night around 12 a.m., I assume, I saw a light go on in the washroom between mine and another room, and I heard scratching on the door. As though something with claws had chip bag plastic wrapped around its nails and were dragging them on the wood of the door. Naturally, I had assumed it had been my family member sleeping on the other side of the washroom. I asked him the next morning, and apparently it hadn't been. In fact, he thought it had been me. Another time, a year or two after that first encounter, my family leaves the house and I'm alone. I stay in my room as I work pretty much every evening before, when I was sleeping in. I was unsure as to whether or not my family had locked the door, but I was overall unconcerned, because again, I live in an unassuming suburban town. Strangely, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, as well as the sound of the floorboards creaking. It was odd, so I called out for one of the younger children. No response. I did nothing. However, I assumed I had heard wrong, or the house was just old. However, I heard the sounds again, and this time it sounded like whatever it was had gone down the hallway and in the direction of another room. I found it unsettling and carefully went downstairs to lock all the doors, which, thinking back, well, wouldn't really have done anything, if something was already inside. We never found anything and I never heard anything after that. Some part of me wants to believe that I had heard wrong and just imagined it, but I know it was real. I have a habit of checking myself with reality when strange things happen, snapping myself out of a daze so I can confirm within myself that it was real. My heavy desk moved by itself, crushing my bed. This incident happened a while ago. I don't have any proof, and I'll explain why later. But I just wanted to clarify that I'm not trying to convince anybody this actually happened. I just want to know if anybody else has experienced something similar. So this happened about 3 months ago, I think. I was sitting at my desk when I suddenly needed to use the restroom. When I came back to my bedroom, I was surprised as I had immediately noticed that my desk had moved almost 1 meter away from the wall. Instead of facing straight against the wall like it was 3 minutes ago, it was now at an angle with one corner of the desk still facing the wall and the other corner about 1 meter away from it. The thing is that next to my desk I have my bed, and this bed barely fits in between my desk and the wall. So as the desk was at an angle, it was now crushing my bed so much that the mattress on the bed was lifted up into the air. Immediately, I kind of thought that I had been, well, maybe it was just my family, I guess. Maybe they just, for some reason, pushed my desk. But I was confused that I didn't hear anything. I was just gone for 3 minutes and the bathroom's right next to my bedroom, so I should have heard something at least. But when I asked my family why they moved my desk, they were really confused. Said that they hadn't been in my room at all. And I kind of believed them because I didn't hear anyone in the hallway even, let alone in my room. They all came to my room to check out what I had meant, and they were all perplexed. The only way that heavy desk could have moved by itself, with such force that it folded my mattress upwards, was if the room suddenly was in a decline. And maybe gravity pushed everything downhill, or maybe if there was a powerful earthquake, but neither of that happened. My brother is usually very logical. He had no explanation. My mother was terrified, and I was just really confused. As I went to grab my phone to take a picture of the desk, my father shrugged the whole thing off, said it was probably nothing and just pushed my desk back in place. And unfortunately, that's why I don't have a photo. Again, I'm not looking to convince anybody. This actually happened, so I don't care if you believe me or not, really. I just want to know if anybody else has experienced something similar, and maybe even knows what it means. One of the most odd experiences of my life involving a Ouija board, a new car, and 4 teens in the woods. So I think I should preface this by saying I was raised by a Mexican mother who's very superstitious. Not only that, but an American dad who's incredibly logical and agnostic. So I've kind of always been in this balance of logical yet open-minded. Growing up, my mom always told me, do not play with Ouija boards. They invite demons and bad spirits into your life. She did everything she could to warn me about demons. And her being a practitioner of Santeria and my abuela being a very, what they call a curandera, a healer, negative energy cleanser. I was warned about bad things my whole life, but never felt the same certainty of the existence. Anyway, this was about 12 years ago when I was 16. I was hanging out with 3 other friends who we're going to call B, J, and I. My friend I just got a brand new car off the lot, maybe 20 miles on that baby. Literally came off the lot to show it all to us, and I'm not quite sure how we started about ghosts, but Jay says, I have a Ouija board, let's use it. So, we get her board. We start trying to use it right in the road. It was under the street lamp of a suburban housing division in Oklahoma City. It's probably about 10 p.m. Of course, nothing happens. So we chalk it up to bullshit. We decide, hey, let's take this car for a drive around the back roads on the outskirts of the city. So we do just that. I'm in the front seat just focusing on the road while B and J are talking about something stupid. Now, we're driving along these back roads in a remote wooded area. The back roads are still paved. We had not been on any gravel roads. His high beams were on, and I'm just looking at the road right in front of me. All of a sudden, we hear a loud pop. Then the car starts making weird noises. We pull over almost immediately. He gets his little key flashlight out, and the passenger side, my side, the tire was flat. But the more we inspect, we see the cause was something that looked like 3 claw slashes right on the side. Now, me and my friend I are discussing the road and how we can't see a single thing in the road that could have caused it. That's when I say the road was bare, and I mean there wasn't a damn thing on the road at all. Not even a branch that could have caused something like that. Plus, it was an equinox, so we were pretty high up enough to be able to notice those things. He's pissed he has to change his tire, especially because it's his brand new car. He's about to open the trunk and we hear another boop, and I scream, "Ow!" at the same time. I run around to his side and ask him what just happened. He pulls up his pant leg and there's large scratches going from his ankle and calf area. The driver rear tire has the exact same scratch marks as the front passenger tire. The claw marks on the skin are pretty deep and drew blood. We're all terrified at this point. Like, B immediately ran into the car and closed the door. We all follow suit, and he locks the doors. We were discussing amongst ourselves what the fuck we just experienced. The logical brain says it's a feral animal, don't get out of the car. And the emotional brain says, a demon did this. Anyways, we call AAA and he gets his brand new car towed. I immediately told my mom what happened when I got home, because I knew it was something bad. She'd help me fix it. Took me to her mother's, I get cleansed and do a couple of Roman Catholic prayers. But after that night, I dealt with the nightmare and sleep paralysis for years. I wonder what it was. The time we heard a demonic scream from this lady who wouldn't speak to us when called. My homegirl is heading home. She calls us saying that she hears a girl in a long sleeve wailing. Apparently it was indescribable. She swings around and comes at us and we go to where we heard it. We're pulled up to this cul-de-sac. We see a woman walking towards this park. We ask her if she heard and, well, she didn't answer. We kept trying to get her attention, and she kept not answering. She walks into the park and we ask again. She turns around and comes toward us. My friend tells her to back off and she almost scurries. She goes even farther into the park and my friends ask if she's human. Then this horrible sound, like a squawking wail, comes out of her mouth. It's horrifying. My other idiot friend squawks back, and she does it again. And at this point, I'm crying, and I make my friend drive away, and I call 911. My friend says she saw 2 different women. One looked young, one I was there to see was old. As I called 911, 2 squad cars started heading down that road. I don't know what happened after. We went to the other side of the park, which was like a 5-ish minute drive to get to, and we see another man calling, and then talking to the cops. But he seemed so bothered when we tried to speak to the cop on the matter, the man simply shooed us away, saying that they had found her. But his vibe was off too. I don't know what happened tonight. But as somebody who believes in God, something sat horribly in the pit of my stomach. I think I had encounters as a child. Did I? This entails multiple short encounters, which I'm not sure are real or not. I was somewhere between 5 and 9 when all 3 happened. Please read all of them. It was about 8 p.m. I was in the restroom brushing my teeth. We had a door leading to the counter area with a sink and then another door separating the toilet from that area. I'd always been afraid of the huge mirror in the counter area. so I would hide in the corner or even underneath the sink as I brushed my teeth. One night after hiding, it was time to get up and rinse my mouth off. That's when suddenly I saw a girl sitting on my shoulders. She looks like she was my age, wearing what seemed like a white or light pink nightgown with the misty black hair. It was only for a second, though. I had past small encounters with her, but I just tried to think of her as my friend. The second and third encounters happened on the same night, so I'm going to connect them. I stayed up late playing on my Nintendo DS or on my Wii U when I suddenly heard the bathroom faucet turn on and off. It was over and over. Some for long periods and some for short. And for reference, I had a loft bed on the same side of my room, or at least the same side that my room door was on. My room was straight across from the bathroom. Eventually it kept going, and the faucet turning on for longer amounts of time each time. I started becoming scared and yelled for my parents and my older brother, calling out their names. Eventually I thought it might be my brother playing a trick on me, so I yelled his name over and over. I started getting very scared, called out more and more, but no responses. The walls of my old house were thin, and our old bedrooms were all near each other. I started screaming, yet absolutely nobody replied. Not Mom, not Dad, not brother. And all three of them should have. Eventually I stopped and hid underneath my blanket for about 20 minutes. The faucet finally stopped. But then I sat up and I felt something watching me. Turn around to see a hand with long white fingers and long painted nails. I hid underneath the blanket immediately until it was gone. What happened that night? I saw something as a kid, and I'm still confused about it till this day. First, I'd like to say that English is not my first language, so I'm sorry if I make mistakes. I'm a 19-year-old female, going on 20 next month. This happened when I was around 4 years old. When I was young, me and my parents and my brother were living in an apartment before we moved to our own house. My grandmother was visiting often, was taking me and my brother out to a park to play. My mom and my grandmother was avoiding most of our family members and neighbors. I didn't understand why they wrote, and I didn't understood why. Tried to fix it. Flipped over myself. And I didn't understand why. But they never let us play with other kids. We had one neighbor, a female, that my mom was trying to avoid the most. She was a really bad old woman. From what my mom was telling me when I was young, I was around 4 around this time, so I was still sleeping in my parents' room in a small baby bed. I don't know what that's called. But it was the one with the fence. Or as they put it, a fence. I was sleeping in it because I was, and still am, really small. I didn't grow much. The bed was next to the corner where the window and I was. My parents put water on my windowsill in case I needed it. They knew I was smart enough to take care of myself, even at that age. One night I woke up really thirsty, so I stood up on my feet to reach for the bottle to drink. But it wasn't filled with too much water, so I planned to wake my mom up to help me. I knew how to get out of the bed without falling or injuring myself. Next to the small bed was a nightstand, so I was hopping off onto the nightstand and then to the ground. Next to the nightstand was my parents' bed. My mom was sleeping face my side, so I walked up to the bed, woke her up. But when I reached the bed and wanted to woke her up, I couldn't move at all. I was stuck in place over my mom's side of the bed. I tried to move, but I couldn't move a muscle. I could only breathe and watch over my mom sleeping. Then something made a sound under. I could tell the sound came from under the bed. So I looked down only with my eyes because I couldn't move my head. And what I saw terrifies me to this day. There was a hand, a pitch black hand like a shadow, but I could tell it was real. Now, I know there's a myth about little kids being able to see things that adults can't, but I swear this was too real. It was moving, kind of crawling on the floor to reach me. I was telling my brain to move, and I couldn't make any sound either because I tried to scream to woke my mom, but nothing came out. The hand reached my feet, and when it touched me, it was burning. It started crawling on me, and it burned. The hand was too long to be a human arm. All I could do was stay there and pray that I woke up from this nightmare. When the hand reached my neck right before it touched it, my mom moved to the bed, and right after that I moved backwards too fast that I hit the little bed and my mom woke up. I could move again. I started crying. My mom woke up immediately and asked me what happened. I was crying so much that I couldn't explain anything. My mom just took me in her arms and tried to calm down. After that, she put me in the bed and she got back to sleep. I took one last look at my mom's bed, and the hand was not there anymore, but it looked like it disappeared in the shadow from under the bed. The next morning, my mom woke up, desperately, screaming at me, "What did you do?" I remember her taking me to the bathroom where she undressed me from my pajamas. She left the bathroom for a moment to bring new clothes, and while she did that, I took a look at my pajamas. They had black stains on the front, right where the hand had touched me. The material looked a little burned too in some places. After this incident, I started having more experiences like this. Once, right after the first one, me and my parents, my grandmother, and brother went on a vacation to the beach. My parents were staying in a room, and me and my brother and grandma in another. The memories are foggy from this vacation, but I remember that I would see people covered in black sludge on the beach. It's something that old people cover themselves with at the beach because it's said that it has health benefits. I would start crying. My grandma also told me about this when I was 16. She told me that when we were in the hotel room, I would start crying, and not to get too close to the bed. When she would ask me why, I would reply with, "Motor roll." But I think what I wanted to say was monster. I thought it was motor oil. Another encounter with this thing was when me and my brother were playing alone in my parents' room in our apartment. I was staying in the middle of the bed, thinking that I won't get snatched by that thing if I was over it. My brother was on the car bed, playing with cars. We had a road-type carpet. A road. I think they mean that little kid's carpet with the roads on it. I forgot about this memory until one day me and my brother were talking, and I was 17 and he was 16. It was some late-night type of conversation that we had. We started to talk about paranormal things. All of a sudden he asked me a question that made my heart drop, and that's with 2 P's. He asked, "Do you remember the black hand from when you were young?" After I heard this question, the memory started to flow back again from the day that we were playing on the carpet. I could see it clearly in front of me. He was playing on the carpet and the hand was there next to him. I was terrified, and I remember. It wasn't just in my head. He had seen it too. I never told him about it. I never told anyone about it. It was so real. After this conversation, I started thinking more deeply, and I came up with the idea to tell my grandma. My grandma is a witch, but she's not practicing it too much now. She was doing curses and spells when she was younger, but with time she stopped and only did card readings and protection spells. So when I told her about this, she got pale and was shocked. She explains to me that she believes it was a spell, a curse from my mother, made by that old lady that was our neighbor when I was young. It was not meant to hurt me, but my mom that night. But somehow I saw it and walked right up to it first. She told me that I could have died that night, but my energy and protective spells that she put on me helped me. After this, I understood a lot about my life. why I started to have nightmares after the incident. Even I never had them, why I was getting sick more often, why I had to go to the hospital too many times that I could count, why my life is so miserable to this day, the bad luck I have in everything. Everything made sense. Ask Reddit. There is a ghost that loves my dog. I'm an artist. Rent a small studio that's on the second floor of an old antique store. Store is quite large, bottom's all antiques, top has a small studio and more antiques. When the antique store is closed, the bottom floor has active alarms. There's a separate staircase and entrance to the studio section. Artists have 24-hour access. Because she is the best girl, my GSD mix comes into the studio with me. Wonder what that is. Dog? Absolutely loves when the store is open. Customers can walk around the upstairs area. My studio's in the middle of the top floor and has 2 doors, one on each end, but the doors are removed. I have dog gates. When people are around, she goes from one door to the next for pets and treats. If I'm there after hours, usually early in the morning, she just chills and sleeps on her dog bed or works on a bone. The past few weeks, there's been an odd occasional occurrence. We'll be there around 5:30 a.m., contently working away. Serene is snoozing on her bed. She'll wake up from a deep sleep, run to a door, full-on tail wag-butt wiggle, level her head like she's being petted, ears back and flat, top of the head flat, eyes looking up adoringly in a dog grin, and after a moment she'll break and run to the other door and repeat the process, just like she does when an actual customer is petting her. The first time I thought somebody else was around, so I checked. No one else there. Nothing on the security camera. Ask Reddit. This happened to me around 2006, 2007. It was the summertime. My family and I lived pretty remotely in the middle of nowhere near woods, trails, and cornfields. During school, my friend told me about how her family decided to adopt a new religion, whatever that meant. She explained her family went into a big city to speak to a religious zealot, or medium who can see stuff that we can't. She told me this medium knew there was a trail that led behind her house, and knew there was a cornfield mixed in, and that was mixed in with the woods as well as behind her home. Nothing spooky about that, just seems pretty common knowledge given the area. Well, the medium also told her that there's a demon or extraterrestrial mytho creature, and it manifests itself behind their home in the woods around 3:14 a.m. in the morning. It tries to communicate through my friend, and thus why she has chronic hiccups. That's a first. Now, of course, when she told me all of this, I didn't buy into any of it and thought it would be a perfect opportunity to scare my other friends who were girls in my class. We were all friends, but I liked one of the girls, and that part's irrelevant to the story. But anyway. So I explained the story of 2 of my friends, and we were deciding to go out into the woods that night behind my other friend's house, in hopes to see this demon or whatever. The girls drove their cars over to my house because we could kind of walk to the trails from my house. It was 2:30 a.m. Took us about 15 minutes of walking to get to the location. The way the trail forms was pretty spooky, because the trees kind of hooked over us, forming a tunnel of leaves and limbs. It was extremely clear that night, and the sound of insects and wildlife was very prevalent. Prevalent. So it wasn't that creepy. Time goes on, and I'm sitting on the ground, and one of my friends is playing on her flip phone, and the girl I liked was talking to me. 3:14 rolls around. I start taunting whatever this thing is. I start throwing rocks into the cornfield and fast woods nearby. About 5 minutes pass, We decided to head back. No longer did it take for me to stand up and take 3 steps. Everything around us got dead silent. No crickets chirping, no movement. Out of the blue, about 6 feet in front of us to the right, a large branch snaps in 2. We hear the most ominous growl I've ever heard in my life. I've lived here my whole life and hunted. I've never heard an animal sound like that. By the sound of the limb snap, we fully expected to see something step out of the brush and greet us. Nothing did. The girls jumped behind me and we just stared at that spot for a solid minute trying to comprehend what it was. We couldn't see a dang thing. It was pitch black and our little flip phones didn't have much of a flashlight like these new phones have. I took a few pebbles on the ground and chucked them in the direction of the noise. Nothing. I decided it wasn't worth the risk of the girls' safety. So I told them to run the other way and I'll lag behind, just in case it is a predator that likes to chase. It'll get to me first. As soon as they took off, absolutely nothing followed us. We managed to cut through the woods and onto a road that led by my house. We got back home around 4 a.m., and to this day I've absolutely no idea what it was. We went back a year later and nothing ever occurred again. I still hear the growl in my head, and it sends chills down my arm. Stuff continuously going missing with no explanation. I needed to grab my paints I left outside to finish something I'm making for my boyfriend for Valentine's. That's cool. I went to get them from the place I knew I left them. They weren't in an untrustworthy spot either. Seen them the day before and they went missing. They were all gone. I know no one would have taken my paints. The small amount of close friends I have over every now and then, they don't really do art. I know they wouldn't have stolen them for any reason. The next thing to go missing I know is small, but I know exactly where I placed it on my bench. And it was my eyebrow pencil. I went to grab it not too shortly after and it wasn't there anymore. Cleaned my whole room after this and still nothing. Even though my room wasn't too messy to begin with, I just deep cleaned it this time. The next thing to disappear would be my piercing needles. I have them in my clear small set of drawers. I put them in the smallest drawer, and my friend wanted me to pierce her nose. Went to grab them, they weren't there anymore. Looked everywhere. No one goes in my room, and I'm home most of the time. I haven't touched them since I pierced both of my nostrils. The last thing, so far as I can say, that's missing is my concealer that I put into my makeup bag. I know very well I did, because I vividly remember doing it, and I never leave any of my makeup outside of the bag when I'm done with it. I have no clue what's going on. I've had no one over since the paint situation. I trust myself to know I haven't, and definitely wouldn't misplace those items, since I like everything to be where it should be. Whether it's paranormal stuff or not, it's starting to piss me off. I've heard of things like this happening to others, and this isn't the first time something like this has happened to me. Creepy childhood experiences. Hi all, I'm a 37-year-old female. I was listening to a podcast about ghost stories. Thought I'd share a few experiences I had in my childhood home. The house where I grew up, it's like over 100 years old and my parents still live there. My dad has actually lived in that house for his entire life. My grandparents built out the attic space into 2 additional bedrooms when he was a kid. The back bedroom of the upstairs was the room my sister and I shared when we were kids, and it's directly above our living room. There have been so many times when I'd be alone in the house in the living room when there would be a crashing sound come from up in our room. Think someone dropping a stack of books. I'd run upstairs, but nothing would ever be out of place. I didn't see anything for years. Figured nobody would believe me. Didn't say anything either. But when I eventually told my mom and sister, they looked kind of shocked because both admitted they'd also been hearing the same noises for years. When I was 16, I was playing Super Mario World in the alcove of my bedroom. I was facing the window with my back to the rest of the room. When you start a level in the game, the screen kind of fades to black for maybe a second or two. When this happened, I could see the reflection of a man standing behind me. Thinking it was my dad, I whipped around to ask, and how he managed to sneak up the stairs. Stairs creaked like crazy. There was no one there. I reset the console over and over again, but the man was gone. I told my dad what I saw. He seemed a little spooked before he told me that I described his father who died before I was born. After that, he refused to acknowledge that we ever just had that conversation, and believed that I was, quote-unquote, just seeing things. The last big occurrence happened when I was 17. This was before the house had central air, so the summers were spent with windows open to circulate air. I had the front door open, but there was no breeze that day. I was playing on the computer when the front door swung shut and latched. 100-year-old door that has to be latched in a very specific way. I froze when I heard the footsteps going from the front door past me into the kitchen. As the footsteps went past me, I heard the sound of a woman humming. Whistling outside. Help. For context, I live in northern Georgia, and lately the weather's been cold, so I've been sleeping with my window open and my screen isn't fully on yet. I was doing my usual night routine, playing games with my online friends. I see a tiny little stink bug. So what I usually do is I pick it up, go downstairs, and put it out front. I open the front door, crouch down to set the stink bug on the floor, and I hear this deep voice on my left. For context, my house is set up to where my front door is pushed in farther than my driveway. I listen closely and it sounds like it's in my driveway near the garage. The whistling was lasting a couple of seconds, and it was the itsy-bitsy spider. Wanted to make sure I wasn't going crazy, so I sat there and listened until the song ended. And the way it ended was slow and menacing, almost being dragged on. When it ended, it was dead silent, and I mean like nothing was moving or making a noise. No bugs, no ambient city noise, nothing. I've searched the web, nice pun, trying to find, what it could be when I come up with nothing, and hopefully somebody on here could help me. How does the end of that song go? Itsy bitsy spider went up the spider web, washed the spider out, dried up all the rains. And the itsy bitsy spider, I forgot. Itsy bitsy spider went up the spout or out the spout again? One of the creepy experiences I had when I was 11. I was 11. I used to wake up at 3 a.m. constantly when I sleep alone. This happens when I sleep in my room, and I've had no problem sleeping alone at my grandmother's house. And it really messed up my mind, but I got used to it over time. But sometimes I feel really anxious and I feel like I'm being watched. Then I immediately rush to my parents' room. And on this particular event, I woke up at 3 a.m. and felt so anxious that I didn't have a second thought. Straight up ran to my parents' room. They took me in and I slept in between them, and after like 3 hours I woke up again, which is odd. I sleep peacefully when I'm in my parents', so I started checking my mom, but she wasn't there. Then I started checking my dad, and he wasn't there either. I remember I was sandwiched between them, if that makes sense. I started panicking. I immediately got up and switched on the lights. They weren't in their bed. I checked under the bed, the toilet, washroom attached to the room, my room, the toilet, then went downstairs and checked the living room, dining hall, and other toilets and kitchen too. They were nowhere to be seen. I started panicking. I was panicking to the point of just bursting out into tears, and I did. Then I checked if their vehicles are still here or not. The vehicles are untouched. Then there was one more room left to check. It was my grandmother's room. And for some background information, she and I are not in good terms. She doesn't really love to see me as her granddaughter from what I've seen, and she's pretty unbothered even if my parents disappear in the middle of the night. Banged on her door crying, but I was hopeless, but luckily, she did open the door and started explaining what happened, and she said, "Oh, we'll look for them in the morning." Took me in. Luckily, I slept with her, and the next morning my parents came looking for me. They didn't even know that I wasn't there until they woke up, and they were sleeping in the same room I was in the whole night. I need my answers, y'all. Did I just get transferred to a different reality? I don't know, but this experience really fucked me up. Ask Reddit. A couple of years back, my boyfriend and I were driving on a country back road of central Illinois. About 9 p.m., cold and rainy, mid-October. Large wooded areas all around. We were in mid-conversation. That's when we both cut off at the same time. We were overcome with dread. To the right of the road was a 6 or 7 foot tall pale humanoid. Its arms were disproportionately long and thin. It didn't have any discernible facial features. Peered out from behind the trees and looked directly at us. We were both silent for about 30 seconds, and I finally said, "Did you see?" And my boyfriend says, "Thank God you said something. I thought I was crazy." A few days later, our two friends were hanging out in their car, and it was in the local car park. It's surrounded by woods and cornfields. The fields were recently harvested, so you could see all the way to the tree line. They said they saw something pale and incredibly thin and humanoid across the field. It ran kind of like a dog, and it disappeared into the woods within seconds. At first I thought it might be something different because I was thinking what I saw was more humanoid. Then I discovered that thousands of people have reported seeing humanoid, pale, naked, lanky things that move like dogs. There's apparently particularly a lot of sightings in Illinois, so that part adds up as well. Lots of reports from the 50s and 60s of pale humanoids as well. It really makes me wonder. Anyway, I'm now convinced that there's an undiscovered humanoid living in America. We haven't proved they exist because they're so fast and silent. They also hide in abandoned buildings, caves, and mines. Ask Reddit. When I was maybe 8 years old, I went to stay with my grandparents for the weekend. That night, I had some really intense night terrors. Something I hadn't suffered from previously or ever since. But Nana couldn't shake me out of it. I was just screaming and crying out in fear for like an hour, like real dread in my eyes. The next morning I found out that my cousin, we were a few days apart, who lived down the same street as my grandparents, had been sleepwalking at the time. And that's the same time I'd been having these nightmares. She walked out of the house, crossed a busy dual carriageway, walked a mile or so into town in her bare feet, got picked up. Thankfully, by a nice couple on their way home from a club, and brought her home. According to my Nan, I kept saying, keep going, keep going. But she likes to sugarcoat stories, so I don't actually know if that's true. Either way, it's always freaked me out. In these two incidents, happening on the same night, the same time, with neither of us ever displaying this sort of behavior before or after. Ask Reddit. Anyway, I went to a high school football game with a friend. It was all going as a normal game would go. Friends hanging out, getting food, and then randomly something happened. The entire stadium lost power. I mean, everything was out, no lights anywhere. We all sat there confused. No voice came on to tell anybody what was going on, and they literally lost power to everything. Then me and everybody else see a shadowy plane-type thing in the sky. It was triangular, kind of like a stealth plane. So it flew ever so slowly over the stadium. It must have been going maybe 30 miles an hour tops. It took about 20 seconds to pass over the stadium. After it passed, we were all wondering what the fuck just happened. Then a second one came. It was further away this time. And if you don't believe me about the first one, then you sure as hell don't believe me anymore. It was about 45 miles away, but you could see it flying ever so slowly across the horizon of the city. To this day, my good friend who I was with still doesn't remember, and well, nobody does. It happened, and I swear it fucking did. Ask Reddit. A friend of mine died when we were 15. She was hit by a drunk driver while crossing the street in front of her house. Before her viewing and the funeral, maybe 1 to 2 days before, my boyfriend and I came out of the bedroom and bumped into my mom coming out of the hallway bathroom. It felt weird in the hallway, like there was more pressure in the air that had been sucked out of it or something. It's hard to explain. My mom looked extremely out of it, like she was in some sort of trance or something. She looked truly bizarre and was swaying back and forth. My boyfriend was freaked out and said, "Joan, are you okay?" She was staring at the floor, paused, swayed, then stared at us but said nothing. It was so eerie. She was staring at us in this disconnected way. It was so unsettling. I really slowly walked toward her, asked if she was okay again, and as I approached her, she held up her hands in front of her face and then held them in this really contorted position and screamed, "My hands, my hands!" She started sobbing, staring at her hands too, and just kept saying, "My hands!" I panicked and reached out and took hold of her arms so I could check out her hands, because they were so weirdly contorted. Thought that maybe she fell and broke them. When I touched her, though, she kind of shook herself out of it and said, "Janie, are you okay? What's going on?" She was super confused as to why she was in the hallway and had no recollection of what had happened. When we went to my friend's viewing, her hands were totally contorted. I'm assuming they were somehow shattered. Maybe like trying to stop the car as it came at her. The whole thing was so unsettling and heartbreaking. It made my heart hurt to think that her last moments may have been filled with such pain and confusion. I'm such a big skeptic, especially now into adulthood, but I'll never forget that interaction, and I truly believe it was her reaching out to us through my mom. I was a skeptic, and now I think I need help. Moved into this house in a farm town in Colorado. Everything was fine and nice. I was setting up my new bedroom in the basement level of a 3-story home. The house doesn't have a negative energy or vibe, quite earthy, so my room's cozy and reflects that. It all started on this occasion where I was once home alone in my room, and by habit I locked my bedroom door. I was hanging out on my couch across from said door, checking the tracking information on a package on my phone. I have 2 small, docile Señor Chihuahuas. It's worth mentioning that my dogs aren't what you would consider yappy, as they're both seniors, 13 male and 6 female. 6 doesn't seem old. At the same moment, I felt a presence outside this door. Dog, F-dog, female dog, Chips, lifted her head from a nap and was paying attention to the door. Once I noticed the presence, I noticed the knob on the door was very slowly trying to turn. I called my 2 best friends, gave them the hush finger over FaceTime. They noticed the same thing. At this point, Chips began to bark. I grabbed my hydro flask for defense, expecting somebody to be there, but there was no one. The same moment I opened the door, heard my mom come home, ran up and explained this to her, and she shrugged it off. Second occasion, I had said two besties over a sleepover and some video games. They left around 7 a.m. At around 10 a.m., my phone dinged. It woke me up. I was responding to my boyfriend when I heard my friend's voice audibly say, "Just go inside." And a different voice responded, "It's cold." I said out loud, "You guys are still here?" I got up and let them in again, and no one was there. Mind you, being basement level, my room is cold. Third encounter, I had a cowgirl hat on a table. Left for a few to drop something off, and the hat was moved to my gaming chair. 1, I know I wouldn't. 2, I wouldn't wear it. And 3, I wouldn't move it. Last and most recent situation. I was on the phone doing a reading of some poetry I wrote, emotional and all. One of my Polaroids fell off a shelf regardless of this never happening to me before. I've never believed in paranormal activity, despite the majority of my family believing. I never have. I always like to consider the rational before the irrational. But I can't explain these occurrences. I wouldn't know what to do or anything really. And if it matters, I'm Catholic and, to be honest, a little scared. Can anyone provide any information or solutions? And did you guys listening notice my Chihuahua's pronunciation? I'm trying to make up for the tomatillo. Tomatillo. I'd like to share something that runs in my family bloodline. I'm Ryan, 14, and a Christian. I've got something to share with you all about my family. We have this thing where we sometimes see strange stuff, like black figures around our house. But I want you to know, some of these things I see can be pretty scary. It all started when I was young, maybe 7 or 8. I was in my mom's room, unable to sleep, and I saw a shadow walking past the door. I didn't hear any footsteps, but I told my mom. She said it was probably Santa or the Easter Bunny. We went back to sleep under the blankets. Then when I was 14, I was in the bath. I saw a black figure of a woman in the reflection. It scared me, but I ignored it and got out of the bath. Another time, coming back from ASDA with my mom and sister, I saw a kid with 2 hands on my mom's room window. Everything was blacked out, but I could tell it was a girl. I pointed it out, but they said it was fine. Late one night, texting a friend named LZU, I heard footsteps in my room. It scared me, so I prayed for protection and everything was okay. Sometimes when I'm alone, I hear voices or footsteps in my room. So yeah, that's my experience with these things. I used to be stalked by a dog-like creature. Ever since I was a baby, I was a magnet to the paranormal. Ghosts, demons, and whatever's in the middle. I would always feel something watching me 24/7. I don't know when it started, but sometime around being 6 years old. I had 2 dogs at the time and would of course let them out whenever I was home from school and during the night. It was all normal till I started seeing this thing in the back corner of my backyard every single night. It was pretty large and looked like my dog, but it would just stand there and stare at me with glowing red eyes. It had the form of a large dog, almost coyote-like. Every night when I took my dogs out, it would be there, watching me. It filled me with so much terror and dread whenever I saw it. I would be frozen in fear. It was so bad that I wouldn't take my dogs outside alone anymore. I tried showing my dad and pointing at it, yet on his end, he saw nothing. Him nor my mom believed me, which drove me crazy. Terrified of my younger self due to the eerie resemblance of it to my, at the time, current dog. I could see its facial expressions, the body and the angle it would move. Sometimes the thing would even pace around in the corner of my yard, but it never left that spot, and I only ever saw it at night. During the day, it would just disappear. It would stare at me even through the windows and blinds as if it knew exactly where and when I was going to see it. This all repeated for years, might I add, all the way till intermediate school, like 5th grade. I should also add that my dogs never seemed to react to it. Now that I'm older, I've barely seen it, but I wanted to ask if anybody had an idea on what this was. This dog-like thing terrorized me throughout my childhood, and I really want to know what it was. I had something similar. Potential Hachishakusama encounter. For some insight, Hachishakusama, the 8-feet-tall woman, is a Japanese urban legend. Information about her can be found by Google search. And if it means anything, I'm Japanese yet live in America. It was around 12 or 2 a.m. at night. My whole family was asleep. I was sitting on a stool and leaning against my countertop while watching some random YouTube video on my iPad. Then I get this weird feeling wash over me. I'm unsure of how to explain it, but it was like the atoms in the room were disturbed. Like a sixth sense, I suppose. I felt uneasy, but unsurprisingly not scared. I could tell something or someone was there. Just as I was about to ignore it, like how I usually do most other times, I could see the spirit or whatever it was out of the corner of my eyes. Standing facing me in the archway to my parents' bedroom was an incredibly tall woman, around 8 or 10 feet, without the white hat on her head. It was almost like a sun hat. She was very pale, almost paper white, and had long, pin-straight black hair that reached to her lower back. I couldn't tell if her hat or hair were covering her face or that she just didn't have one. She wore a simple plain white dress that seemed to have been somehow dirtied due to the grayish/black mud or whatever on it. To say it simply, it just wasn't clean. She didn't scare me or make any sound, only stared in my direction or at me. Strange because I'm mostly able to tell the intentions of any ghost or spirit that decides to show itself to me. And I found it strange how she was wearing all white and looked exactly like Hachishakusama. But I don't think it was actually her, since you'd have, to hear the evil spirit Hachishakusama go po-po-po in an eerie voice before you actually would see her. So I'm unsure it was her, and if it was, I'm pretty sure I'd be dead by now. Hachishakusama. I think that's right. My first memory was of seeing a demon. I won't forget it in this life. As a child, I woke in the middle of the night and turned over. The side of my bed was this 3-foot-tall demon with black matted down fur. It had sharp teeth and an ear-to-ear grin. I made eye contact with it and it started laughing, kind of like a golem from Lord of the Rings, but more wicked. Gollum. It said to me, "Starve, starve, starve," and laughed some more. I hid under the covers for a few minutes. I lifted the covers off my head and it appeared to be gone. But then it slowly rematerialized at the end of my bed and was smiling. Then it faded out and disappeared. I ran to my mother's room and told her I saw something scary. She said like a kind of prayer for me, and surprisingly I just went right back to sleep. I woke up the next morning and out of the corner a 7-foot-tall glowing man walked out into the middle of my room. He wore a white gown with a thick gold belt and gold sandals. He had a very peaceful smile. I think it was an angel, but he didn't have wings. I covered my face with a blanket, and when I removed it, it was gone. Memories I will never forget. Supernatural experience. So I'm in my 30s now. For the most part, kind of forget. I don't really think about this weird time, but every now and again I have a few hours obsessing over it. This might be a little long, but when I was a little girl, we would spend every weekend at my grandma's. My mom was an only child, so it was only me and my brothers, no cousins, which made us very close to our grandparents. Me and my 4 brothers, I was the only girl. We'd all go on a Friday night, but on Saturday my brothers would leave and I would stay until Sunday night. It was mainly when they had left that this would happen to me. I would get severely depressed. And I need you to remember I was only around 6 years old. Like a weird knot in my tummy and a horrid black cloud that made me feel sick. My grandparents were wonderful and kind of doting, but it was their house. I would think about dying all the time while I was there, and have actual panic attacks where I would jump out of bed and run to landing and screaming for my grandma. I had only my own bedroom, and it felt like there was something awful in there. I need to make it clear how when I was at my mother's home I never felt like this, never experienced anything like this anywhere else. My grandparents' bathroom was opposite their bedroom. And sometimes when I would leave the bathroom, I would see water dropping from their door frame. I would watch a few drops, and I've kind of touched the carpet and see if it was wet, and never was. I've tried to catch the droplets and watch them fall into my hands, only to find them dry. I was so scared in that house that I could bring myself to flush the toilet because of the noise. I was certain something would happen to me while the noise of that flush was filling the room. It got so bad that I started asking my mom to come home first thing Saturday morning, because the depression and awful, dark feeling in the base of my tummy got to be too much. I would think about going from Wednesday onwards. I would worry about it and fret. I loved seeing my grandparents when they came to our home, and the dark, bleak presence of their home never followed them. Years later, my grandma got very sick. They relocated to a bungalow. Since losing them both, I've driven past the house and I don't get any feelings now. I often wonder what this was, and I'd be interested in talking to anybody who's ever experienced anything like this.